So Joey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So, I understand you work with top performers and you talk about how to help people stay at the top of their game, right? And so that means dealing with all the chaos that goes around us and still being able to focus on getting results. Tell me, how did this become how did you get here? In short, your intro into how this became a passion for you.
Yeah. So in short, I mean, it was really, I happened upon it by accident. I was just fascinated around the idea of personal development. And I kind of got into it because, I was actually in a lot of pain and I was looking really just to eliminate that pain and try to figure out life for myself. I ended up meeting a prominent mentor of mine in Los Angeles, Dr. Lou. And she was a prominent psychologist there who worked with kind of the elite of society. She had a lot of Fortune 100, 500 execs, famous movie, producers, actors, actresses, things of this nature, pro athletes. And, when she got a case that she kind of got stuck with, she would kind of lob them over to me because I was teaching kind of the internal training aspects. I taught mindfulness and meditation and internal training. 20 years ago is when I got started, way before it was popular the way it is today. And I was able to get results with people inside of an hour or a half hour or a few sessions that were very uncommon. So she got very interested about this idea of sort of what I think of as inner performance or inner training. And then she kind of coached me inside of the arena of psychology. And that's really where I got my start. Within a year, I had 88 private clients I was coaching one-on-one. That led to seminars. Today I teach 40 programs a year throughout the country. Different parts of the world. We have 80,000 people who've gone through our programs and training. So it was really something that I accidentally found.
That's fantastic. But what I really want to hear about is what kind of pain, right? So people want to hear, they want to get to know you, all of that they can read on your bio and everything, which is important and great. Sure. But I want to know, what was it that drove you into, meditation? What, in short, what was the pain that you worked yourself out of that you use these techniques for?
Sure. So I grew up in Wichita, Kansas. There's nothing to do out there. And my second year of college, I fell into partying, tons of drugs and alcohol. Basically, if you found me back then, you probably wouldn't find me sober. Right. And my second year of college, I just had no idea what I wanted to do, didn't know what I wanted to major in, dropped out of college, had a sales job. I kind of chased commission gigs so I can make decent money, or at least get by, if you will, to kind of basically, live this insane lifestyle that I was up to. And I remember, one day after a pretty good, binger, I was probably up 2-3 days straight. I woke up at 3 a.m. or so and was like, if I don't make a change, it's unlikely I'm alive in a year. So I have to do something different. And in that moment, I remember thinking to myself, I think that what's most important is that I find the idea of happiness. And what does it mean to know peace and fulfillment? And I didn't really know anybody around me at the time that had, that I would say was happy and really excited about their life, right? And so I said, I'm going to go figure that out. And, that search literally took me all over the world, India, Thailand, Japan, throughout Europe. I was a live-in student with a guy in Boulder, Colorado, and then I ended up in LA. And basically, if it had to do with personal development, whether it was psychology or the neurosciences or meditation or mindfulness or the ancient wisdom traditions that have been up to this stuff for literally thousands of years, I just kind of threw myself into it, trying to figure out how to get myself on point. Essentially, is where it all started.
So, what was it that really worked for you that you felt helped you find yourself?
Yeah, I don't think it was any one thing.
I think
it really, it was a combination of things. I'm an obsessive person, kind of like partying. Like when I decided I was going to do that, I did it all in, right?
Right.
And so when I decided I was going to figure out what really is the key to fulfillment, what is the key to happiness, I went all in. And so I was studying, I was meditating 8 hours a day in temples in India for 30 days straight, right? Okay. And then I met a Harvard-trained neurologist, and I was like, why does meditation work? Why is it that these people have been doing this for thousands of years, right? I studied Taoist meditation. And then he really helped me to understand the brain science behind why breath work, why meditation, why mindfulness was as effective as it was. right? And then I met Lou, who kind of taught me the psychology behind this, like pattern dynamics, right? Where do our patterns come from in terms of emotional patterns, mental patterns that drive every choice, decision, and action that we make? And like, where's the root of that? And help me to understand pattern dynamics. And so it was like, through the last 20 years, I just kind of found a piece here and there that was necessary for the puzzle, so to speak. And then today, what I train people inside of is kind of the cheat sheet, if you will, of those entire modalities, where I kind of found the best of each of those practices and put those together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. I've been thinking deeply about some of the patterns that drive. Now you've got all this educational background, right? So I'm interested to pick your brain a little bit, right? We're going to have a little fun on today's interview, because I've been thinking about control and how it's weaved into like our essential fabric, right? Is our desire and our need for control, and how it unconsciously makes us or drives us in certain directions, and creates procrastination or perfectionism, which I talk about in my book, right? And where that balance is, so that it doesn't become obsessive, right? So you talked about obsession. I'm just curious on your take on that. Is how does our relationship with control play a role in us finding this high performance?
Yeah. So I think that the more a human being tries to control something, inherently, the more out of control they become, right? And I think that most people who strive for control, I definitely know I used to be like a control freak, right? Definitely would fall into that category. And what I found was like the need for control, really comes from this desire or core need to essentially feel safe in one regard or another. If I can expect what's coming, then I know it's going to be okay. I know I'm going to win. I know I'm not going to lose. And then that translates to I'm not going to feel pain, right? But the reality is there's a lot more that we just can't control in terms of ourselves in the world and that which happens than what we can influence and control. And I think that acceptance around that the idea is not to control things, but rather to pay attention to the influence of things is what makes a difference.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also say that the more we chase something, the less we're going to have of it, right? And control is, we try to control everything and everyone, and then we're going to be more out of control than ever. So I'm a recovering micromanager, so I speak like that. So good. So what are some tips, with that in nature? What are a couple of tips? You talked about breath work, and I think people underestimate, right? We breathe every day. So we don't think about it. We don't think about that as a tool that we carry around with us every day. So perhaps we could just take a moment to talk about a couple of tips there on how people can bring out high performance with just that thing they carry around every day.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we break down what every choice, what every decision, what every action that a human being takes, if we look at what really motivates those choices, those decisions, those actions, if we look at it at the base core essence, it really is an emotion, right? And I work with a lot of high performers, and they think, well, I'm a very rational person, I make rational decisions. But the reality is our nervous system really isn't built that way, right? If we look back to where we were like 6 months old or a year old, our entire communication system was emotional. We were feeling sad, we were feeling happy through the mirror neurons in our brain. By way of just sort of being exposed or impacted by the people or our primary caregivers around us. And for years, 100% of our language and the way we interacted with the world was emotional communication. And so if we look at, in essence, when do we perform well? Like, when are we performing at our best? When is an athlete in the zone? There's a sense of joy there. There's inspiration driving that, right? There's a sense of peace there, or we feel a sense of love and connection, to ourselves and to those around us. And if we look at spaces where our highest performing moments exist, it's in our highest emotional states. And if we look at the places where we perform, in the least, there's fear, there's anxiety, there's panic, there's shame, there's guilt, right? There's choices and decisions and actions being motivated by those lower spectrums of emotion. And so breath is one of the best tools that we have to essentially switch the the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system's off, which are responsible for things like shame and guilt and anxiety, and get into more of a parasympathetic response, which is love and inspiration and passion and joy and those spectrums, right? So, if we understand how to leverage breath, we can understand how to manage the nervous system essentially.
So for those that are listening, so you're basically saying that with breathing, we can take any of those emotions that are, let's call them unproductive in the moment when we're trying to reach high performance. So fear, anxiety, guilt, shame, whatever. And we can switch that like a light switch. We could turn that into and transform that energy into more productive energy.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Right.
right.
Yeah. And a lot of us,
I want to repeat that, right? So that people hear that like it is possible. It is possible. I mean, we also know, like, think about, we listen to a song, right? We can be really like feeling bad and sad, and then a really awesome song that we love comes on, right? And it can shift our emotional state like that. And I just want people to understand that we can shift like that out of an emotional state and access the best part of ourselves, even though we thought a moment ago we weren't able to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Like so many people, I think, inherently believe that emotions are just sort of, like this mystical force, right? They're there or they're not there. But when you really understand the nervous system and how emotions function, emotions really are trained. They're conditioned. The emotions that we feel today didn't just occur. Those were trained and conditioned in the way that we were brought up, by the environment that we existed in, the things we were exposed to, and so on and so forth. And this is actually a really good thing, because if emotions are trained and conditioned, well, then that means we can train and condition the experiences that we want to have, and even, sort of conform those emotional patterns, to relate to the outcomes that we want to achieve and the level in which we want to perform. I remember, like, I'm no longer a competing martial artist, but I definitely still practice to stay healthy. And I remember when I was competing all over the world, my martial arts master, I studied a very traditional martial art, and he said, if I'm going to train you, you have to win. And I remember going to competition and going to world championships, and literally, like, I would perform very well in the dojo, and I would perform very well at practice, and then I would get to competition and I would choke, essentially, right? I would lose.
Right.
And I would often lose to people and competitors who were far less talented than me, and I would not lose performing at my best. And that used to be so frustrating to me. And people would come up to me after competition, people that I trained with well, and
Right.
my buddies and whatever, and they'd be like, "Dude, I thought you had that. I was certain you were going to win. Like, what in the world happened there? Like that guy's not very good." And then that just made it worse, of course, because I already
Right.
felt bad for losing.
Right.
And then I remember I thought, like, well, why in the world is this happening? And I started paying attention, like, what do I do in training that's different than competition? And I was like, everything is mostly the same. I'm executing the same combination of punches and kicks. Like, essentially, I'm trying to execute literally the exact same thing I do in one place than the other than the environment, the fact that there's, thousands of people watching or whatever.
Right.
There shouldn't be anything different, right? And when I stopped and I paid attention, when I was at the dojo, I was really just having fun, right? I was joyful. I was connected with my friends. I was relaxed.
Right.
And really, I was just having fun. And there was a sense of joy there. There was just a sense of, sort of creativity in the process.
Right.
And when I got to tournament, I started focusing on winning and what would it mean if I didn't win, and, disappointing my teacher, my master. And then I started looking at, then anxiety would be there, fear would be there. And so all of a sudden I was shutting my own nervous system down without realizing it. And so that was where I really started to create a ritual. And I said, hey, I'm going to, like, breathe in a certain way, put on a certain focus, pay attention to what I do at practice. And I'm going to do that exact same thing when I go to tournament, when I go to compete. And, ultimately, I didn't make any change in my training regimen, any change in nutrition, like nothing. The
Right.
only change I made was I would turn on my state, and I would make sure that I was in that experience of fun and joy and kind of creativity before I would compete. And the moment I started doing that, all of a sudden, I pretty much began to win pretty consistently, pretty regularly. And that led to 3 consecutive, world championship wins in a row. And then essentially I decided I was going to be done because there's a little bit too much of an impact on the body. But that was where I really understood and learned the distinction of emotion and performance.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's a great example, right? Because everybody can relate to a moment in time, whether they're an athlete or in any area of our lives, where we just freeze. So just to light this up for people who are listening, it could be in a job interview, right? Where all of a sudden you choke, you don't remember what to say because you're all nervous and fearful about getting the job. It could be in a performance review. It could be, at any high stake moment. It could be a moment with your children where you're trying to have an important conversation, and that doesn't happen. So I think we can all relate in any area of our lives. Do you have some anything to say about that, about taking it out of a sports context and into our life context?
Yeah, at the end of the day, like where we train emotion and the more frequently we do it, the better we're going to get at it. So if we notice that we feel overwhelmed at work and we just attempt to, be calm and inspired and passionate just at work, well, we're probably not going to be very effective because, the reality is we're not just overwhelmed and anxious at work. We're overwhelmed and anxious at home because we have one nervous system. We take ourselves everywhere we go. So something that I always encourage, the people that I train to do is like, hey, pick one emotion or state that you want to start with, that you want to train. And maybe it's just a sense of calm, when you first begin. Like, hey, I'm just going to note where I am and see if I can get to a place of calm or peace or, a general sense of just being connected to myself, right? Or maybe it is inspiration, right? Pick one quality that you're just going to sort of try to bring throughout your day. And whether you're, at home and you're hanging out with your family, it's like, check in occasionally. Am I there? If I'm not there, can I get there? And then when you go to work, it's the same quality. Like, hey, am I there? If I'm not there, can I get there? Because we have one nervous system. So if we pay attention, like if you ask yourself the question, what did I wake up to today? We all woke up to something today. Some of us, we woke up, there was a bit of anxiety. Some of us woke up, we were sad. Right? If you're like my dog Spence, like he clearly wakes up every day and is just lit up, he's bouncing on his hind heels and super excited to be alive for the day, right? Some people hop out of bed and they're just joyful and the lights are on and they're passionate and they're just ready to go. And if we pay attention, we typically wake up to the same thing every day, right? There's a habit, there's a routine of emotion and feeling. And so if we can start getting clear on what we want to feel and we can learn how to train that, how to turn that emotion on, before you know it, it becomes a reflex and it is what we take to every part of our day.
Yeah.
The more we allow ourselves to be angry or feel anxious or feel overwhelmed or feel sad, the better the brain gets at producing that experience and the harder it is to kind of shift that state. And so luckily it works the other side too. If we learn how to sort of turn on that parasympathetic state and, be a bit happier and be a bit more joyful, and we spend a bit more time there, that becomes our norm, that becomes our reflex, that becomes prevalent.
So I have a couple questions. So first of all, I want to talk in a moment for some of the ways how I might shift my state, right? We talked about breathing as one of them. We can come back to that. But what about, there's all these people who talk about, I don't know how this is in our language anymore. There's toxic positivity, right? So maybe somebody would say, oh, that's toxic positivity. You're saying that I'm going to train positive emotions so that I'm just going to be positive all the time. And I'm just going to be like, positive Penny. That's funny. So what would you say to that?
Yeah, I think that toxic positivity comes from when we become disassociated from the feelings and the emotions that are present. So a lot of times when people are sort of like rose-colored glasses, right? Like awkwardly positive, that tends to be a mental event where we're just sort of positive about life all the time. But yet the actual feeling or emotion that person might be experiencing is a little bit of sadness or unworthiness or shame or something like this, right? And it almost becomes like a cover up for how they're feeling. And that doesn't, like an overcompensation. And then the byproduct of that is we actually become a bit disassociated or disconnected from the emotions that we feel and what's actually present. And because we are emotional beings, and because of the mirror neurons in our brain, right, which are responsible for empathy, if somebody's overly positive and I'm sitting with them, and yet I feel as though they're anxious or they're overwhelmed or they're sad, then I know there's this disconnect, and so it doesn't jive for me, which is completely different than if I'm actually experiencing, a sense of happiness, and what I'm sharing are just my thoughts and my natural expressions as a result of being happy or a result of being grateful, then then it's connected and people feel that, they know that, and it doesn't rub people the wrong way.
Well, do you feel like that sometimes it might rub people the wrong way? Like, some people say, well, then you're pushing down emotion. So let's take away from the person let's say they are connected, right?
Yeah.
They're connected. They really feel positive about things. They really try to look at the silver lining that, yeah, this situation sucked, but I'm going to move past it. I'm going to move on. Right. And so somebody else might be like, no, you should be pissed. Like, that's toxic positivity. You should
Yeah.
not be moving on. You should be wallowing for a little while. What would you say to those people who are saying, you can't just pick up and move on, or you just can't have a positive outlook or look at the silver lining all the time?
Yeah, I to those people, I say thanks for your opinion and your input, and
Right.
I feel great, and I'm moving on, right?
Right.
Because what I find is the idea of influence. By nature, if I'm a joyful person, right, and it's not that we're always going to feel joyful, right? That's just not possible. Like it's healthy to feel sad sometimes, or
Right.
to feel shame or to feel guilt. But if we get caught there, right, if we get trapped there, that defines our experience of life in a certain way, and then it really limits what we can produce, what we can create in the world, right? But at the same point, if I'm joyful and the people around me are like, man, Joey, you should really be angry, I go, I hear that, like, thank you for your opinion, but I get to determine the experience of my day. And I can accept that maybe this wasn't a great thing that happened, but I'm also just not going to let it define who I'm going to be today. And I'm going to move forward. I'm going to create the life that's important to me.
So it doesn't have to mean that you're pushing down negative emotions. You're just choosing that it's not going to impact you, right?
Yeah, it's like, what do we want to carry forward? It's like, and the way I think about it is like, hey, the people in my life who are closest to me, like, I want them to have the best of me, right? I want them to experience the best I have to give. And if I have something happen at work and maybe somebody, does something unkind, or, they have bad business ethics, or, they say some nasty things about me, or I don't know, whatever goes on in the world, right? Like, we all make mistakes. We all kind of have those moments. If I don't realign that, well, then, I bring that anger home, and I bring that sense of unworthiness or sadness home. And then that's what I'm sharing, in the relationships with the people I care about.
Yeah.
And so that's different. And then maybe I get caught there for a week or a month or a year, right? And sometimes people get caught there for a really long time. And it's like, well, what's the appropriate time to suffer, right? And in my opinion,
what's
the appropriate time to suffer is like the amount of time I choose, right? And so, for me, I might feel a sting for a minute and be with it. And then I always ask the question, well, who do I want to be moving forward? And how do I want to respond to this? And what's important for what I carry forward? And what I find is that like things that are maybe not great that happen in my life, they're just not worth suffering over. Right. Because if we get caught in anger, we get caught in feeling unworthy or sad, and like that's what we wake up to every day for the next month, is it really worth suffering like that? Is that really worth bringing that impact to the people in our life? And I understand if we don't know how to train emotion, we don't know how to make these shifts. Like there was a time I didn't know how to do that. Like, that's totally okay. Like, it's all right that we are where we are. But if a human being wants to know how to change their emotional state, they can learn how. And it's an extremely powerful thing to do. And not everybody around us is going to be happy with where we are. But the reality is that not everybody's going to be happy with who we are anyway. So you might as well be happy.
Doesn't matter. It matters that we're happy with where we are, right? And
I think so.
Need everybody's judgment. So awesome. So just before we close out the show, what's one other quick breathing is one technique that can switch our emotional state. What's another quick way that we could shift our emotional state?
Yeah, what I'd say is if someone wanted to get started with this, 3 just basic things to start implementing that if implemented, like if you did it right now, you would notice a little bit of a shift and change, is number 1, just ask the question, hey, where am I? And focus on your body, listen to your body. Do you feel expanded? Do you feel contracted? If you can name the state, hey, do I feel sad? Do I feel anxious? Do I feel happy? Do I feel joyful? Just sort of name where you're at. What I find is the awareness of where we're at starts to create a change of where we are, just by way of naming, acknowledging it, being okay with that it's there. Right. And then step 2, just take 2 or 3 deep breaths, and do so through the nose. When we touch the tongue to the palate of the mouth, we take a gentle but deep breath in through the nose. It stimulates the vagus nerve in the back of our throat, and that tells the parasympathetic nervous system, hey, everything's okay. Let's relax a little bit, like we're safe, okay? It sends a signal to the brain that way. And so you just take a deep, full breath in through the nose, find that top breath, and then exhale, and then you let all your air out, maybe 2, 3 times. And then from there, like if you're going to train an emotion, just pick something and then start to just focus on it. Hey, what reason do I have to be grateful right now? That's a great one to start with, right? It's very simple. Hey, what reason do I have to be happy right now? And at first, the mind might go, you have no reason. There's no reason to be happy. There's no reason to be grateful. And you got to kind of override that, because that just might be the habit of thinking that we've gotten inside of. But if we stop and we really, just take 30 seconds, a minute, and pick one quality. Hey, what reason do I have to be grateful right now? Just start with the simple things, like I'm alive, right? Like I had a clean shower this morning. I had a warm shower this morning. I have clean clothes. I have food to eat. I've got income. I have options. I have choices. I have opportunities. And just name a few things that fuel the emotion that you're wanting to generate. And without getting in depth, and obviously, emotional training can be very in depth and very intricate. But those 3 things are a great way to just start shifting your state right away and starting to train the emotion that you want to get inside of more often.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you? What's a good website to find you and your resources and your training courses?
Yeah, we always have a special deal for the podcast like this that we do. And so if they just go to theinnermatrix.com, that's a great place to learn more and read my book and get started with the things.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you all for being here, because this is an opportunity for you to really get clear on the choices that you have and how you show up. And, these are great. It's just being able to do the inner work, to be able to live the emotions and the life that you want to live is within your grasp. So go check out Joey's materials, and we'll see you in the next episode. This is Penny Zenker, and you're listening to Take Back Time.